When looking at the pros and cons of lying, we have to look at the larger goal and context, which is the continuum of intelligence, which is the evolution of a protocol towards generating more sustainable well-being and conserving more energy in the process. So the highest form of intelligence is yielding large amounts of multidimensional sustainable well-being for all of the different participants in the game. That's a highly intelligent game. And the least intelligent game is spending large amounts of energy to create large amounts of multidimensional and unnecessary suffering for all of the players. So we have a continuum, and it's an infinite continuum of intelligence. So looked at from that angle, right and wrong refers to the direction of intelligence. The right direction to move in is more conservation of energy and higher yields of sustainable well-being, if possible, at the same time. The wrong direction is to consume more energy to make things worse. So we have a right direction, we have a wrong direction. Now, all of this exists within a paradigm, within a system, and the first part of a system is a paradigm. And a system is a means by which to transit through a circle. All reality is circular. The sphere is the most graceful, the most intelligent shape that is known in geometry. And so the cycle towards intelligence is circular. The cycle of life is circular. We breathe in, we breathe out. We breathe in, we breathe out. Now, if we breathe in and then breathe in, try and breathe in some more, that's the wrong direction. And so there's a transiting through a cycle. Now, the human brain reduces the system of transiting the circle into a level of simplicity that can be grasped by the human mind. And so it might transit through the circle something like this, where it moves around using 5 distinctions. Now, if that's the system being used, and it's an important caveat, if that's the system being used, then the right direction is actually moving to the right. And we want to go to this point. The wrong direction would be going back here. The right direction would then be moving this way, moving this way, moving this way. Now, I say within the confines of the system because the circle in and of itself is an infinite number of planes, an infinite number of dots to compose the circle. So the system of transiting through the circle can be as complex or simple as need be. It can be breathe out, breathe in, but very aware and conscious breathers understand that there are an infinite number of points in that wave, and they'll identify, more than in and out. That's the simplest duality that a system can be reduced to, is in and out, in and out. In fact, it's a process of coming to the end, much like the birth-death circle. A simple mind will reduce that to someone was born and then they died. The vast majority of the interesting things that go on, however, in a life are not the moment of birth and the moment of death, but the entire cycle and circle of life in between, that coming in and breathing out. of a human consciousness. So there's a right way, and the right way exists within the confines of a system. Because if instead of this being a 5-pointed star, it's a hub and, let's say, 32 spokes. And again, we're, in this case, moving to the right and to the right and to the right. But we might just as easily, if you start with an exhale, then the right thing to do is to inhale. If you start with an inhale, then the right thing to do is an exhale. So well-being is facilitated with a graceful navigation of the circle. And the more complex the system, the more each point is consciously traversed on that circle, the more graceful the system, the more symmetrical the system. You can think of a car wheel turning. If the hub is a few inches off to the left and you're driving at 70 miles an hour, there will be tremendous vibration because you're not centered. The faster you move, the more being off center jolts and stresses the system. And so refining the system becomes more and more important the more weight that is put on the system, and the faster one is moving through the system. Symmetry becomes more and more important. You can, very, very slowly, ride a watermelon lengthwise, up and slowly down. You can do that if you're going very, very slowly, and it may even be interesting. But if you put this on a car traveling 70 miles an hour, and you have 4 watermelon wheels, not literal watermelons, but just compressing the steel into that shape, it will be incredibly violent. And this is the problem with cult-based systems, otherwise known as cultures, is that they're based on self-referential dogma that elongate their shapes, that create highly asymmetrical cults, series of memes that do not correlate highly to intelligence or the circle. They correlate highly to repetitive self-identification. You can think of someone who's very depressed, and they wake up and they immediately start remembering the thoughts that made them depressed, and they recognize themselves because I'm the one who is depressed, and they might get a little uncomfortable or upset if suddenly they felt joy about something because, wait a minute, I'm depressed. And so, whatever the system is, it's a self-referential system as opposed to referencing intelligence. So all of this is backdrop to, the awareness of lying, because lying creates energy consumption. And there's a couple of different forms. The first form of energy consumption in lying is you have to come up with an alternate story. If someone says, "How are you feeling?" the easiest thing to do is just let it flow out. I'm feeling this, this, and this. That's the easiest. You don't have to imagine anything. You don't have to plot something out. You don't have to work out an elaborate story. You don't have to calculate the odds of what's going to get me the more pity or gold or whatever the asset that's being manipulatively pursued, whatever it is. You don't have to think about any of that. You just say, I'm feeling sad and I'm feeling gratitude. It's so simple. It's effortless. So on the conservation of energy side, telling the truth is the most efficient thing. Silence, a little bit easier in the short term. However, if nobody sees you because you're silent, then it quickly becomes expensive in the long term. If someone says, who'd like to order, and you stay silent and other people place their order for, they'll have a milkshake and they'll have some pad thai and this, and you stay silent, well, you conserved energy, but you didn't get any food. And the same is true when someone says, do you need anything? How are you doing? That kind of thing. If you stay silent and nobody sees you, but you're thirsty, then you don't get any water. And then it can, it can be worth the investment to be visible. And if you're going to speak and if you're going to be present something, the easiest thing is to present the truth. That takes the least amount of energy and imagination. And then once you've told the truth, you can let it go. Whereas if you tell a lie, you have to start thinking about what you will do if other pieces of evidence come to light that reveal your lie. And so you have to bribe this person to also tell a lie. So it takes tremendous amount of energy to create and tell and then maintain a lie. So that's the first cost. That's the first form of inefficiency. The second cost to a lie is that anyone who believes the lie will start making energy investments based on the belief that that lie is true. And those energy investments will often be wasted. You could think of, asking your best friend, does Lisa like me? And your best friend knows that Lisa absolutely doesn't like you. But you also know that, I'm not interested in the truth. I'm interested in a fantasy, right? So your best friend doesn't want to get into a debate and all that. So he says, oh yeah, I'm sure Lisa loves you. And so now I'm making a preparation for my proposal, right, to Lisa, because, she likes me. I knew it. It's important. I like Lisa. So I'm going to prepare this. So I'm expending all this energy. But if I was truthful, and if my friend had a little bit more courage, a little bit more spine to deal with my delusions rather than spout a lie, just to get off the hook, then I wouldn't be wasting that energy. I could be instead doing something more useful with that energy. For example, letting go of my fantasy of Lisa and coming up with a fantasy that I can act on. And that is going to generate more well-being in the long term. Dealing with reality, responding to reality, and investing in a direction that's actually going to pay off is going to bring better, higher yields of well-being with less energy in the long run. So that's the second cost of lying, is wasted energy based on the lie. Now, the other thing that lying does is it bifurcates or splits the heart, mind, and the body. Because at some level, we are in tune with the truth. It could be intuitively, it could be kinetically. We look at the body language of the pattern of people around us, and the body language of everyone that we're seeing in this situation points left. But the lie points right. Now, as a chauvinistic culture, one of the forms of chauvinism is in the split between symbol and essence. So you have a human state, an essence, and then you have a form, a symbol, that shrouds or represents that state. Now, the form is the masculine expression, whereas the underlying feeling, the underlying state, is the feminine expression. And so in chauvinistic cultures, the symbol is elevated and the essence is not very important. So, for example, in a chauvinistic company, there would be a tremendous amount of upset if there was a negative review. There isn't upset that the facial expression of the client was unhappy. Who cares about the client? There isn't problem that you look at the work and you say, well, the work could be better, but that's no big deal because that's nobody's seeing that symbol publicly. But if there's a negative review, then there's, oh my goodness, because the symbol is valued more than the underlying reality. And so in a situation like this, people are going to pay more attention to the words than to the body language, than to the felt experience. You know, if you're talking with your wife and she says, of course I love you very much. Well, but her body language is, just get out of here, I'm trying to read, right? The person that's focusing more on the symbol, on the form, is going to say, oh, that's all I needed to hear. I needed to hear those words. But I don't really care about the fact that, my wife is obviously annoyed at the interruption and stuff like that. I've extracted the symbol. You'll find the same thing in banks and all over the place. If you know the code to get into someone's bank account, they'll give you all the money. If you go there and you say, look, I'm me. This is me. You don't recognize me, they won't give you a penny because the folk, but you don't know ABC higher, upper class T star. You can't get in. The symbol is valued more than the underlying reality, and that is, that is referred to biblically in the metaphor of the golden calf. Thou shalt not worship a false god, a false symbol that doesn't correlate to an underlying asset. It's similar in investing in derivatives. If you get too attached to derivatives and have absolutely nothing in terms of an underlying asset, it ends up creating problems for you and the economy in general. Particularly when those derivatives, out of sync with the underlying assets, are leveraged. So then the lie is compounded. It's the same as saying, is this the healthiest cow in the herd? And if someone says yes, and knowingly lies, and it's obviously not, and you focus on that, and then you place a bet on that cow, and you leverage the bet. You place several bets. You place a bet with this person, this person, this person. So you've got 10 bets all based on a lie. Well, then as the truth is revealed, because the cow doesn't win the race or whatever the metric is, then you're not just losing once, you're losing 10 times because you leveraged the bet on a lie. And this is when severe pain occurs, when you create a leveraged high-stake bet on a lie. You cause tremendous harm to yourself, and then that ripples out to other people. So these are some of the costs of a lie. Now, that bifurcation, though, is a very important one because it disintegrates. As human beings, we naturally move towards integration. And one of the more important forms of integration is integrity between our heart, our mind, and our body. Because if our heart is saying, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it, and our mind is saying, it's not a good idea, but our body just does it anyway, i.e. has an illicit affair and or whatever it is, it weakens the self, the pattern of energy. You can think of a rope. If you tightly weave and braid heart, mind, and body together, they will have a synergistic impact that cannot be broken the same way that a fragmented heart, mind, and body can be broken. So if you separate heart, mind, and body, and first you snap the mind, and then you snap the heart, and then you snap the body, you can do that. Because let's say you're trying to tackle something and you've got 300 pounds of pulling power, and the mind and its weave is woven together at 200 pounds of strength, and the heart is 200 pounds of strength, and the body is 200 pounds of strength of integrity alone. Well, if you pull 300 pounds on one and they're disintegrated, it'll snap. It's called going insane, losing the pattern. You pull on the heart, 300 pounds, it'll break. You pull on the body and it'll snap. At a certain point, you pull stuff apart. But if you weave the three strands of heart, mind, and body together, you get more than 600 pounds of integrated strength. And so a 300-pound trauma or a 300-pound pulling force isn't going to snap the self the way it would snap an unintegrated self. And so integrity is one of the sources of power and strength which tie into intelligence, because if you can get more done with an integrated self than you can get done with a disintegrated self, then you are more intelligent to integrate the self. And another way of looking at that is like a tug of war. If over on this side you have your heart and your mind, and over on this side you have your body, then if your body is pulling you this way because it's disintegrated with your heart and your mind, and your heart and your mind is pulling you this way, the heart and the mind combined will override the body. But the body is not going to be a willing, happy partner. And so you've weakened yourself by 1/3, because 1/3 is going against the other 2/3. You've actually only got 1/3 left to navigate with life. So you could have 3/3, but if two parts of you are pulling in the opposite direction, they cancel each other out, so now you've got 1/3. So you go from 3/3 down to 1/3 simply by divorcing, having one part of your heart separate from either the body and mind, or one part of the triangle pulling in a different direction than the other parts. This is a profoundly inefficient state. One part of me is pulling me here, two parts of me are pulling me there, and I'm going from full power to 33% power. It's a tremendously inefficient thing. So it's very intelligent to mend the rope, to mend the fences within the self, to bring the heart and mind and body into one unit. So one of the things that disintegrates heart, mind, and body are lies, where you have the heart and part of the body sensing that this is true, But then you have the mind saying, no, no, that's a Harvard professor, or that's a scientist, or that's the president. So what they're saying must be true. So we should do this thing against my body and my heart because it must be true, because so the mind is saying one thing, the heart and the body are saying the other thing. So if you educate the mind and say, well, what are the statistics of presidents who have lied in these situations? And you realize, wow, 50% of all presidents have lied in these conditions of war. Okay, so there's a 50-50 chance that my president is lying. Now, what's my heart and body saying? Well, if you inform the mind of the statistical area with accurate data, then maybe you get a converged resistance. No, I'm not going to fight that war. I'm not going to go to that war because you're telling me this, but my heart and my body are telling me this. And my mind is now informed and understands that 50% of all presidents have lied in these types of situations. I'm not doing it. And so it's incredibly potent and powerful to be integrated, because now you have 600 pounds of pulling power to create your reality with in some form, rather than just 200 pounds. It's a huge difference. Naturally, you will have at least 3 times the impact, but sometimes a lot more, because sometimes if you can just get to this one thing and start a momentum going, it'll snowball. But if you only have 200 pounds moving in that direction, rather than all 600, you're not on board. You're not on board with what's actually going on. And so as a disintegrated self, you can have a calamitous failure, because there are certain things in life. You could think of getting on an important plane. If you make 99% of the effort and arrive just 10 minutes after the plane takes off, all of that energy was wasted. Now, you only had maybe 30% of you, I'm not sure I want to get on that plane, and so you dallied and didn't, and then waited a little bit and you stopped for coffee. You only had 30% of you dragging you backwards and saying it wasn't dragging you down. But that 30% led to being 10 minutes late. And so all the energy gathered towards this didn't actually result in a return on investment. And that's really important. It's a similar in a startup, scenario of half the employees think what we're doing is a bad idea, and you've invested $200 million into the startup. And there's a cash burn period. And so you're burning through cash and you're going down and down and down and down and down. And you get near zero. But if you can get this product out and get cash coming in before you run dry, then you can make billions. But if you crash at zero and are just 10 million short, and you can't pay to ship the item, you can't pay to do this, then you lose all 200 million. And so being integrated is incredibly important, that you want this. You know why you want it. Your heart, your mind, your body wants it and understands where it's going, why you want it, why you believe in this path. So that's the weave of integrity, the weave of integration. And it's a tremendous work. It's a tremendous amount of work, and it takes a self-learned skill in a dissociative, traumatic, and largely insane cult to actually find your center, create a model of reality that your heart, your mind, and your body can relate to, and that actually delivers useful results in the reality around you. And then to proceed on that path as an integrated unit. Now, a lie, when part of you believes the lie and part of you doesn't, will split a person. When part of you believes in a lie and part of you doesn't, a lie will split you between the part of you that knows the truth and the part of you that is choosing to invest in the lie for some purpose of your own. Because there are benefits to believing the lie. Maybe you don't get thrown in jail for being a draft dodger. If you choose to overlook the fact that 50% of presidents have lied in this situation and harmed their country in the process. Now, that's a very expensive loss of power and initiative if one part of you believes a lie and one part doesn't. So that's another, that's another major expense. It's a major energy consumer. Now, if you believe that people are basically good, then all things being equal, if people know what's actually going on, they will, within kind of, while working within their narcissism and their wounds and all of that, they'll generally not go out of their way specifically trying to hurt you. And so having people understand what's going on in your situation is generally, not always, but generally going to result in less damage. You could think of it this way, because this is an analogy we can all relate to. Do you want to turn on your running lights if you're driving at night on the highway? Now, if you believe that as soon as people can see you, they'll ram into you and hit you, then you should turn your lights off. And then they won't be able to find you as easily. And so theoretically, you will arrive at your destination safer with your lights off than with them on. Now, this isn't actually the case, because as soon as you turn your lights on, everyone else can see you. And both to avoid damaging their own car and yours, they will work to go around you if they can see you clearly. If you put a decoy, though, if you say, no, I'm over here, and you light up your decoy and turn your lights off, you're hiding, right? They're very likely to drive around the decoy because they're trying to avoid you, and you're telling them you're over there. And then they're going to hit you because your lights are off and they didn't see you. And so this is sometimes what happens when we lie. We say, how you doing? We say, I'm fine. They say, okay, see you later. And that stings. Why does it sting? Because we're not doing well at all. But they're pretending that we're doing well because we lied to them. And so the sting is still there, like, why didn't they care about us? But we said we were doing fine when we weren't. And so they don't know that we're in absolute misery because we didn't tell them the truth. So these are some of the costs of lies. Now, when we look intergenerationally, a parent that tells a lie and then doesn't want to admit that they're telling lies will often not own up to the lie. And so a child or a family may inherit a lie from a previous generation. Now, that lie may provide the basis for wrong turns based on false information for several generations. Because, we believed that They started it, but in fact we did, right? And so we're behaving as if they started it, but in fact we did. And what is needed is an apology, but instead we're waiting for an apology because we're living in a lie. So we spend vast amounts of time not flowing, not dealing and moving on and healing the pain around us because we've got a deck with missing cards. There's either lies of omission. Now, lies of omission are just as damaging as lies of distortion. And you can see this when you think of a mathematical equation. So if we say 5 plus 7 equals 12. Now, if I pretend that this is a 9, not a 7, then it looks like someone who gives me $12 is shortchanging me because I'm basing the equation on a lie. It's not actually, we're not actually dealing with the same number. So that's a problem. So that's one problem. But the other and much more common form of distortion comes when the 7 is just hidden. It's a family taboo. We don't talk about 7s in this cult, in this family. And so we're just not going to talk. So we have 5 plus equals 12. And anyone can look at that and says, 5 is not 12. Why does it say 5 is 12? Now, the grown-ups, not adults in this case, but the grown-ups, are going to say, shush, shush, don't talk about that, because they know that there is a hidden 7 in there that is being protected because it upsets a family member who's high in the power structure, or it upsets a member of the community that's high in the power structure, that doesn't want to hear the truth. You know, the president does not want it known that they had bad grades at school, and so even though they did, and that's playing itself out, that cannot be talked about. So 5 plus nothing equals 12. So you have a distortion. Now you can think of how damaging this would be in a business, where you'd say our expenses are 5 and our income is 12. So we're making a ton of money. But in fact, our expenses are 5 plus 7, our income is 12, our expenses are 12, we're working our asses off and we're not actually making a single penny. Our expenses are 12, our income is 12, it's not a profitable company. Now, if you hide one of the expenses or don't count it, could often risk or inflation, for example, it can seem like you're making progress, because you're hiding one of the costs. And so here again, the price is acting based on wrong information. So if I buy the company thinking it's making lots of money, when in fact it's not making a penny, my well-being is going to go down. So let's turn now and look at instances when telling a lie is beneficial. So there's all those costs. And the other thing that, of course, certain kinds of lies fudge the meaning of words. We say, don't tell lies, and our child catches us telling a lie. And then rather than saying, you're right, I'm sorry, I'm not following my own advice, and I'm lying. Now we have what is retained is a good meaning of the word lie. But we're too cowardly, right? We couldn't possibly own up to a 6-year-old, heaven forbid. So we edit what lying means. No. See, parents are able to do this for these reasons that you don't understand, but it's not lying. So we've just taken a lie and we've said sometimes a lie isn't a lie. So we've just reduced it by 50% of its value. It was a useful symbol. Lying is not telling the truth. I just didn't tell the truth. But now I've complicated it to avoid looking bad to a 6-year-old. Which begs the question, how old are we at a psychological level? And now lying is sometimes telling the truth and sometimes not telling the truth, right? So it means absolutely nothing. We've reduced the value of the symbol. And that, when words become meaningless, it's incredibly inefficient, because if you can count on somebody paying back a debt because their word actually means something, and they say, we have in a real crisis, but we will pay back the debt next week. Please give us $50. If you can count on their word meaning something, and the $50 averts a crisis for one person and strengthens the trust and goodwill in the community all around, then that is very intelligent to do. But if that person's words mean nothing, maybe they pay it back, maybe they won't, then you don't give the $50. And then their life goes into free fall, because now they didn't have the medicine that would have stopped the need for hospitalization. So now next week they need a hospital bill. Now it's not $50 for some medicine. Now it's $10,000 for emergency care. And then you didn't believe them then either. So now they have a dead thing. Now they have a $10,000 funeral. They're not working. So now the community suffers an economic loss of $50,000 in depression. And then there's anger, because for the rest of the interaction in the community, every single time that person sees you, the one that wouldn't lend the $50, they're going to blame you for the death of their son. All because, what? They were so unreliable that half the time their words meant this and half the time it meant that, and you didn't want to get burned again, only to be told that, no, I'm a good for my word, I'm just not good for my word. You didn't want to deal with that. Now they've got a dead son. Now you've got a family feud, because we couldn't be bothered to protect the integrity of the symbol, the meaning of the symbol in its purest form. And the purer the form is, the more you have to acknowledge there's a little bit of a lie in there. There's a little bit of this in there. And so it's very efficient. It elevates trust when the symbols match the reality, because it's so much less energy to believe or not to believe a word than it is to go personally look, because you could actually get into a taxi and drive over to the Sun and see if they're doing it, and then you could follow them around all week and see if they'll pay you back and remind them every day or whatever. But that takes so much energy. But if that's your last $50 and you can't believe someone, then you have to spend all that energy or open up a community feud where now you're blamed for the loss of their son, and the community is out, however many tens of thousands of dollars in the economy over the feud. Now people have to stop their productive work to make sure you two don't come into a fight together. Because every time they point out that you killed their son and that you point out that they lied and they never paid their debts and this and this and this, then they can't bear to deal with the fact of their dishonesty and that it might be their fault, plus the grief of their son, and a culture that lacks the competency to deal with grief. Now there's all this unexpressed emotion. Now the whole community is being sucked in because one person couldn't tell the truth. But of course, it's never that simple, is it? because all memes are viral. So if one person couldn't tell the truth, it's usually because they had parents that couldn't tell the truth either. They were that 6-year-old kid looking up at dad, beating mom, but telling you not to hit your sister, right? And then slapping you in the face for pointing out their hypocrisy, right? They were doing that to you. And you looked around in the community saying, please, someone stop this horror from continuing. And everyone looked away and said, it's not my problem. Every idiot looked away as an intergenerational wound perpetuated itself. And then every idiot pays the price by being part of a cult of feuds and tremendous inefficiency, because a 6-year-old couldn't be protected from the stupidity of his parents by a single community member, because everyone turned away and everyone pays the price. So it's a very high price, and it's not about one individual. Because when one individual, for tens of years, for decades, repeats a destructive habit, whether it's lying or not, and nobody responds in any effective way to stop the habit, then everyone is a participant in that particular wound. Everyone is basically saying, we'll accept lying in our community because I don't want to deal with it, and you don't want to deal with it, and you don't want to deal with it, and you don't want to deal with it. And the person lying doesn't want to deal with it. And the person being lied to is often unable to deal with it alone. And so we'll accept lying. And we will accept all of the many ramifications of lying over time. So it's a very high price. Are there any times when lying is good? Or more accurately, more good than telling the truth? Well, going back to that, definition of intelligence and, looking at the efficiency of generating well-being, let's say your father is in a drunken stupor. And when he's in a drunken stupor, he convinces himself delusionally that Grandpa Joe ruined his life. So every time he gets into a drunken stupor, your father gets his gun and starts looking for Uncle or Grandpa Joe, whoever. But then every time he gets undrunk, he sobers up, he realizes that Grandpa Joe was the best thing that ever happened to him, number one. Number two, he feels tremendous remorse for the scene and he apologizes to everyone. Now, your father walks in a drunken stupor, and he is going to shoot you or beat you if you defy him in a drunken state. And he asks where Grandpa Joe is. Should you tell him, yeah, Grandpa Joe is down in the basement where you can corner him and shoot him? See, here you have a situation where you have all the negatives of lying that are clear, but everyone will be better off if in a drunken state your father doesn't find Grandpa Joe. And so if you say he went down to the lake, and that saves Grandpa Joe's life, and that saves your father from, a lifetime of remorse, and as a result, a tremendous amount of harm is averted, that offsets the innate damage of lying, then the lying is better than participating knowingly in a murder that will damage the family and the community for decades. So it's about, you have to know the incredibly expensive cost of lying, Because even in a drunken state, your father will probably remember. People in drunken states have a tremendous ability to remember things that they feel like remembering and forget all kinds of other things. They will probably remember that you sent them down to the lake. They may, in their non-drunken state, be very grateful to you. Thank you so much. Thank you. But in their drunken state, you lied to me last time. There's a cost. It's a tremendous cost. But here you have to then look at things like, how dumb does a community have to be to leave beer around when every time Dad gets drunk, he wants to kill Grandpa Joe? How dumb does everyone have to be to pretend that this is nobody's business? Well, as dumb as we are, sure. But it's not, there's no innocent parties in this. A culture of drinking to deal with feelings. How much shame has to be dumped on men before the only way they can feel any relief is to get into a drunken stupor? How many people have to die of suicides and other things before we start teaching emotional literacy 1 hour a week in high school? I mean, if we want to be absolutely dumb in every way imaginable and just hope for the best when chronic intergenerational abuse cycles have repeated, for 10 generations and counting, then we are entitled to be morons and to participate in the murder, the depression, the suicides, the grief, the addictions of our cult. But not as innocent bystanders, as active participants that create and allow these patterns to continue without being questioned. So the cost of lying is very high, and sometimes, particularly as a short-term measure, in an incompetent environment, because in a competent environment, lying is not necessary. In a competent environment, someone doesn't have to get drunk to process their feelings. Their feelings get processed competently, honorably, in the community circle. But we're not a competent cult. So we are filled with people who are not and will never thoroughly process their feelings in the community in a healthy way, because we've made no such way available to them. And so they've come up with their own way of getting drunk every month or whatever it is and going on a rampage. And because we can't be bothered to make a safer, better way of dealing with those feelings, we just put up with it. In an incompetent cult environment, lying in the short term can be better or higher on the intelligence scale in certain situations that avert long-term irreversible chronic suffering by misleading someone who lacks the competency, either short or long-term, to understand that the path that they're pursuing to try to feel better isn't actually going to work. If someone's trying to kill themselves and looking for their revolver, telling them, oh yeah, I moved the 45 bullets over into this drawer, they're right there, shall I get them for you? Is very helpful, is very courteous, is very truthful. But if your family is going to suffer for the next 30 years because you were so helpful and truthful, a little bit of lying may be in order. We are a dysfunctional cult in many ways. And so understanding the big picture, which of course requires more intelligence than most of us possess, enough to determine when lying in this or that situation is superior in its outcome in terms of sustainable well-being than telling the truth, is a tough one. And sometimes in marriages that are good long-term marriages, where there was a night of infidelity or something like that, sometimes if you lack the intelligence to communicate it in an effective way, if your partner lacks the maturity to understand that even though you have caused tremendous damage to trust, that both of your lives will suffer tremendously if you get a divorce at this stage in time, relative to healing the trust. Sometimes a lie may generate more sustainable well-being than telling a truth, particularly in blurting it out in public, etc. In a cult that doesn't know how to deal with these things in a more competent manner. That's not to say that each of us doesn't have the capacity to create a community framework, a community environment in which lying is never necessary, because it is always costly. Always. There is a tremendous inefficiency in lying. But sometimes in highly dysfunctional cult environments, the pain that the lie averts is bigger than the pain caused by the lie. And in those rare instances, then lying can be more intelligent, whether it's a lie of omission or a lie of edited data. Though most of the time, this leads to a sense of betrayal and a bigger problem to deal with in the future, than simply to gather a group of competent people, hard to find in a busy, dysfunctional cult, and navigate the terrain together to move back to the efficiency of truth. Because lies ripple out. When some person says they're doing fine when they're not, then when they behave strangely, it's misinterpreted. And then when someone responds to that, that's misinterpreted. The whole data set is set off with a lie. Telling the truth is efficient. It is a symptom of competency. It's also a symptom of empathy, because here's another situation in which telling a lie could be more right than wrong. In an empathic environment, where we're talking about normal human beings on the freeway who, when they can see you, they will not crash into your car, they will avoid you. Telling the truth and being visible is generally a terrific idea. However, in a sociopathic environment in which scarcity is present, so there is scarcity leading to competition to survive, in a sociopathic paradigm, someone says, "Where is your food? Where is your money?" If you tell them, they will use any means necessary in a sociopathic environment of scarcity to take your means of survival and discard your survival for their own. In that environment, hiding from someone who can take what you need to survive in a sociopathic paradigm is a good idea. Hiding your bank account or your crypto wallet from a thief and making them think that you only have $50 on you and that's all that they can get out of you is a good strategy. if you need that money to survive. And your thief is obviously a sociopath. Now, if they're an empath in distress, meaning they just really need food to stay alive and they're surrounded by sociopaths, then giving them what they need to survive will be enough. Here, you're hungry, here's $50. And if that's what they really need, they will say, thank you, I'm sorry I had to steal from you, but I've got to get this back to my kids. We're really in a rough patch here. You have an unwilling sociopath in a corrupt, incompetent environment that's leading to scarcity. So, 2 exceptions to the rule, both of which lead to more overall sustainable well-being, to a very costly activity. Hi, I'm Dane Rose. All knowledge begins with a paradigm, and out of that paradigm comes an idea, an awareness that we adopt, reject, or synthesize into something better. It doesn't become wisdom, it doesn't become useful until we take action, until we integrate it into not only our thoughts, but our feelings, our body, our words, and our way of being. For that to occur, we have to move from the passive media paradigm into more active engagement. In the link below, in the More Information section, is an invitation to join a very small, deliberately filtered, high-quality discussion with a group of people who share a common language and want to work with these ideas, with me and with one another, with the sole goal of creating 10 times more sustainable well-being for ourselves and those around us per unit of energy invested. Thank you for watching.